Welcome to another virtual Live Talks Los Angeles event. We welcome Senator Tammy Duckworth and Bradley Whitford to our series. We invite you to visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel for over 300 conversations. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Our handle is Live Talks LA. Senator Duckworth's book is Every Day is a Gift. Senator Duckworth is a former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel who since 2017 has served as the junior senator for Illinois. A proud Iraq war veteran and a helicopter pilot, she represented Illinois' 8th District in the U.S. House of Representatives, and prior to that served as Assistant Secretary for Public and Intergovernmental Affairs in the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and Director of the Illinois Department of Veteran Affairs. Bradley Whitford gained fame as the sarcastic yet vulnerable Josh Lyman on NBC's The West Wing, for which he won an Emmy. He worked successfully in theater, film, and television. In 2019, he was awarded the Primetime Emmy Award for his work as Commander Lawrence, the architect of Gilead's economy in the 3rd season of The Handmaid's Tale. Bradley was most recently seen starring in NBC's comedy Perfect Harmony. And he previously interviewed Mitch Albom and Bishop Gene Robinson at Live Talks Los Angeles. I'm Ted Haptagaber, founder and producer of the series. I'm going to let them talk for a while, and towards the end, I will pose some questions that came in from you in the audience. Take it from here, Bradley.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I am thrilled to talk. I've been instructed not to call her Senator, so I will call her Tammy.
Yes.
But I have a disposition. We met, I don't know when it was. Was it when you were running? Was that 4 years ago?
4 years ago when I was
yeah.
running for the Senate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you came all the way to Chicago for me. Thank you.
I did. You know, whenever people get cynical about politics and about politicians, make generalizations that are cynical, I say 2 words, Tammy Duckworth. This book is, I devoured this. I truly did in one day. And it is a story of resilience. I love the way you write. It's your voice. It's funny. It's audacious. And this is, it's the roots of your patriotism are clear, what this country represented to you and the opportunity that it gave you. You know, I kept thinking about how strange the transition and how quick the transition and abrupt the transition was from during a time of incredible trauma, going into the world of politics, basically out of Walter Reed. I'm curious about that transition. What were your fears, and what you enjoyed about going into the political world? I know it was it wasn't a glorious beginning; it was a frustrating beginning. But just talk to me a little about that.
Yeah, so I left the hospital early against doctor's orders in order to run. I was actually still on, I talk about this in the book, an intravenous drip of antibiotics. I had one that I had to have beyond every 4 hours and one every 6 hours. But the deadline was coming. You had to file your petitions to run. It was rough. I was just barely keeping my head above water in that first campaign in 2006. And then I had Rob Emanuel calling every day to cuss at me or someone on my campaign because we weren't doing enough, and it literally, there was nothing that I could do that was enough. I just worked my butt off as hard as I could. And then we still lost, and it was devastating. But it was definitely drinking from a giant fire hose and not ever feeling like I was, was quite enough. The part that I loved most about it was actually talking to people. I'm pretty introverted. I'm not a gregarious, work the room kind of person. But it forced me to talk to people and get to know folks, and just hearing people's stories. I think that is still one of the funnest parts of my job is meeting constituents and sitting and talking to them and listening to their stories of how they got to where they've gotten and what kind of help they might need.
It occurred to me, I recently read Obama's book, and it occurred to me that without Dick Durbin, we would not know either of you. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. You wouldn't know me. I would be working at Rotary International went back to my old job, and I loved my job. We were helping people do humanitarian missions. Rotarians do humanitarian missions around the world, and that's where I was headed back to. Yeah, but yeah, Dick Durbin started the petition to get Barack Obama to run for the White House, and he's the one that called me up and said, hey, I know you're still in the hospital, but you need to run for Congress if you want to take better care of veterans. And my response was, I'm still medicated and in the hospital, right?
well, there are some senators who need some medication, it seems to me. But it really was your inspiration to run. It was Dick Durbin saying, and man, a guy, you chose a wonderful husband. It was Brian who, having gone through this incredible trauma with you, understood that for all the fears about going into politics, this was a place where you could do more for veterans. It seemed like that was the motivation.
That was the motivation, but he also knows me, and he knew that I've just lost my mission in life, which was to serve in uniform, to serve as a helicopter pilot, and I was adrift. And Bradley, I know that you've worked a lot on veterans causes and veterans issues. You've lent your name to things, and veterans homelessness is a cause that we've both worked on. It's one of the things that happens is that veterans, when they leave the military, they lose their mission, that cause greater than themselves that they serve, and they're trying to find it. And that's what's happened with me in the hospital. I realized I would never be able to fly helicopters again. And I was adrift. And right then, Dick Durbin came forward and said, well, here's a new mission. You can still take care of soldiers the way you did in the Army. Just do it here in public office.
Yeah, there's an extraordinary scene where your husband bumps into a 19-year-old woman whose husband has is in a coma. She has a little baby and she's weeping. I think that people don't understand how it is possible for us to be so sloppy in our care for people who are willing to put their lives on the line for our country. Can you talk a little bit about why that was ever true, and how what progress we have made in taking care of the people who are willing to fight for the country?
Yeah. Well, in that case, her soldier husband had been in a coma for 6 months. She had, they'd gotten married, and he'd been in the Army maybe a minute before he got shipped off to Iraq. And so she had this baby with her. And my husband actually bumped into her because I was in getting surgery. And he was walking the halls while waiting for my surgery to end. And he sees this young girl who's about 19 holding, 8-month-old, 9-month-old baby, and she's weeping. And he says, well, what's wrong? And she said, well, I haven't been paid. My husband has not gotten a paycheck in 6 months. And he said, well, that's not right. She goes, yeah, I don't have any more money for diapers. I've cleaned out our savings account, and I've missed 2 payments on the mortgage on our trailer at Fort Hood. I don't even, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, have you gone for help, through the administration at Walter Reed? And you have to understand, at the time, the healthcare at Walter Reed was above the best, was the best in the world. I survived because of the highest quality of healthcare. But the Bush administration at the time expected the war in Iraq to be over in 2 weeks. Remember, Donald Rumsfeld said, they'll meet us with flowers and candy and we'll be done in 2 weeks. So there was nothing administratively ready at Walter Reed for the huge influx of family members and the long-term stays of these war wounded. They were so severely wounded, but not dead. That's how we got sloppy in that, and Dick Durbin at this point had, he had given me his personal cell phone number, which I then promptly abused.
I love
So Brian called him up and said, so Brian took this young girl to, the Army administration's like, she's got to, and then he figured out that they said that somewhere along the line, the Army pay people had decided that, well, he was safe at Walter Reed. They've been paying him, and they said, well, he's safe at Walter Reed. He's not actually in a combat zone. He doesn't deserve to get his $200 a month combat pay. So they took it all back. So they took it all back and left him with no pay. And they're like, well, he's unconscious in the hospital. He doesn't need the pay. And he's like, yeah, but there's his wife who's 19 and there's an 8-month-old baby with no food or diaper. And so, you know, both my husband and I, having been in the Army for 12 years at this point, and my husband longer, knew how to fight the bureaucracy. But this 19-year-old bride, she didn't know. Right. And so Dick Durbin became the unofficial ombudsman of Walter Reed. And after 10 months of this, was when he called me. It's like, you need to run for Congress so you can do this yourself.
Yeah, maybe he just wanted to get you off the phone and into your own office. Yeah. How are issues like homelessness for veterans? How has that improved, if it has, over the last 5-10 years? Are we making any progress? And if not, what do we need to do?
The biggest progress we made was during the Obama-Biden administration. During those 8 years, there was the initiative to end veterans' homelessness. And what happened there was a change in the way the services, the DoD, thought about how to take care of veterans who were homeless. Prior to that, and even at the VA, in order for someone to get care and get help, you had to go and be clean and sober. So you could be homeless and you need help and you want to get mental health counseling, or you want to get help with your addiction. The VA would say, okay, we can take you into our inpatient treatment program, but you have to be sober before you can come in, which was stupid. It was an oxymoron, right? You're trying to get help with your addiction, but you're being told to get over your addiction before you can get help for it. And so the Obama administration started this no wrong door approach, this reduction of harm approach, and put a ton of money into community partners so that no matter where that veteran showed up, whatever door he walked in, whether it was the VA or the Army or even a community hospital, there was no wrong door. He was going to get the federal dollars to get him into a treatment facility. That dropped the number of homeless veterans by over 75% during those 8 years. Yeah. Unfortunately, within the Trump administration, they tried to zero out the budget for that. Luckily, bipartisanly, the members of Congress came together and said, no, you're not going to do that, and put some money back into the program. But it didn't receive the high priority that it did under the Obama-Biden administration. So we regressed a little bit. We're better off than where we were 15 years ago, but we're not as good as where we were 4 years ago. And so you're going to see Dr. Biden, Joe Biden, really put a lot more effort into this as part of her Joining Forces initiative.
Yeah, I was always disgusted by the flag waving, along with the combined with decisions. You discuss one that the Trump administration made about making sure that weren't they National Guard troops would not get their retirement benefits, so they decommissioned them one day. Yeah. It's disgusting.
So they called them up for special national emergencies, whether it was a hurricane or something like that, or in Washington after not the January 6th, but the earlier incident where during the summer with people protesting for Black Lives Matter, and the president's little photo op at the church that he tear gassed peaceful protesters and used aircraft to suppress them. So they brought these National Guardsmen and women onto duty to come provide security, but they ended their orders 1 day short of the 6-month mark at the 179-day mark. It's at the 180, because at the 880-day marks, you get additional benefits like healthcare, like retirement points, and you get all these benefits once you serve for 180 continuous days. And what they tried to do was end the orders at the 179-day mark, give them 1 day off, and then bring them back on orders the next day for an additional 179 days, just to cheat them out of GI Bill benefits for themselves and their children, to cheat them out of all of this. And I will tell you that it was a bipartisan group that got together and pushed back, and we were able to call them. Once they were caught out on it, they backed right off, and we were able to get them the troops left on the full status for the 180 days.
I couldn't help. I mean, I'm always aware of what you're doing, and I sense a certain post January 6th elevation of anxiety,
pissed offness.
Yes.
Angry. I'm angry.
Yeah, and you're very aware of the hypocrisy of jingoism. I that thing with Al Franken, where the soldiers don't always want to hear "thank you for your service" when they're lying in the hospital. Is that fair to say, or they get exhausted, or it feels a little pat?
They know who means it and who doesn't. That's what I was trying to get to in the book.
Right.
They know which celebrities who come through are really there for them and care. And they know who's saying thank you for your service sincerely, and who others are just, as you said, it's pat, it's just rote. They just say it and then they keep on going and they don't really care about you. So right. the troops get pretty tired of the, stop using me as a prop and thanking me for my service when you really haven't thought about it and you're just saying it to say it.
So Al Franken adjusted by saying he would say to everybody, "Thank you for your catastrophic injury." Is that what he would say?
Yeah. Thank you for being grievously wounded. And we all love that. So he started signing, his autographs with that, was "thank you for being grievously wounded," and we all thought that was hilarious. Because in the book I talk about the amputee petting zoo. We hated being in the amputee petting zoo because that's what it felt like.
Right. You guys, you're trying to work out and get out of there, and a lot of politicians and Adam Sandler, who I know a little bit, who is a very, very sweet guy by all accounts, is very sincere. Gary Sinise is very sincere. And they don't just show up to take a picture and put on their Instagram.
Right.
But what is it like for someone who has devoted their life to service to this country to see a bunch of people? I thought about it in the book because when you first come to America, you can't believe that you see a bikini made out of an American flag. Because in Thailand, certainly in Singapore, you would go to jail for that. But what is it like for you to see a bunch of people trying to overturn an election while waving an American flag?
Betrayal.
Yeah.
And for me, my feelings that day, as I was barricaded in a secure location, waiting for the Capitol Police to come get me out of there and reunite me with all the other senators. I have one of my staff members is a former Iraqi translator who was hunted by Saddam Hussein, he's Kurdish, he's a former Kurdish fighter, and he helped enforce the no-fly zone and was driven into the mountains and watched babies. He said every newborn baby died, every born over the age of 60 died. We starved to death out there on those mountains that Saddam hunted us, and Americans came in and dropped MREs, and President Clinton rescued us off of that mountain, and he was there with me. So we knew we could take care of ourselves. We had one other staff member, my IT guy, and I think he wasn't nervous because he knew between Abdullah and me, we weren't in danger. The insurrectionists were in more danger from us. But my feeling was betrayal and anger, especially as I saw the same flag that was on my uniform in combat, that same flag I wore on my shoulder as I went into combat, being used to beat police officers. Being used to break down the doors of the Capitol and the desecration of the sacred place that our Capitol is. I never, my entire life, thought in all those years that I spent in foreign countries helping defend democracy and helping people fight for democracy in other countries, that I would have to face defending democracy in Washington, D.C. at our nation's capital. So for me, it's been more anger and betrayal, especially when some of those folks who were there, those insurrectionists, were also veterans, and some of them currently serving military men and women. That is the ultimate betrayal of your oath.
Right. And I think when we were watching that day, one of the things that's continuing to upset me is Senator Graham seemed to be distancing himself from this. We need to, and then there's been this retrenchment into this sort of faux jingoism that has been normalized by, a number of the people who you work with every day. It's just it's very upsetting. I can only imagine what it's like for someone who has served as you have. Talk a little bit about your everybody's parents are impossible to understand, but talk a little bit about your parents, and about your relationship with your father. It's a very interesting thing because he was in some ways a difficult guy. You went through an especially harsh transition from sort of worshiping to realizing maybe he wasn't the hero that he wanted to present himself as, a difficult guy, a guy who didn't give you, partially because you're a woman, the attention and love, and yet he I don't know, in trying to understand him, your life, there was a certain emulation of his career. Just talk about your dad for a little bit. He was such an interesting character.
I never intended to write a story about my relationship with my dad, but it emerged as I wrote the story in this book, and I started telling, and I realized that relationship, it was critical to who I became. Yes, early on I was daddy's girl. He adored me, he treasured me, but as a little girl, and that was less than my brother.
Right.
He's very traditional. He comes from the South, and my mom is Asian, so there's this whole veneration of the male child, and that was just the role. We would sit down to dinner, and dad would get to pick the first piece of fish or steak or whatever. Then Tom, my younger brother, would. Then I would. Then my mom would. That was just in Asian society, there are social structures for everything, and there's a rank. And oftentimes my mom didn't even eat with us, and so my dad was always grooming my brother to follow in his footsteps. My dad had a previous family, and all of his children from the previous family were all girls. So Tom was the only boy, the only Duckworth,
right.
And so Tom was, my dad groomed him to play baseball and groomed him to join the military and all of that. And I was always constantly trying to get my dad's attention to say, hey, look, I'm really good at softball. I'm a really good athlete too. But he never came to a single game of mine my entire childhood. And so I spent striving to do things to get my dad's attention, get his approval. He still loved me and treasured me, but in a different way than he loved and treasured my brother. And I became very frustrated because my dad had this bluster. One of the reasons he loved living in Asia was because he occupied a higher social status in Asia than he did back home, where he would have just been another guy with a high school diploma raising a family, which is a perfectly honorable thing. But he wanted to be more, and he got to hang out with kings in Asia because my dad is a really good marksman. My dad was part of the President's 100, which is the 100 best marksmen in the military, and so he used that to be able to go to shooting ranges and work with the sultans and sultanas in Asia. And so he was able to mix with the rich and royalty because of the skill. And so when we fell into poverty, when my dad lost his job in his 50s, and we went through this descent, and we finally ended up back on U.S. soil, there was, as you said, a very abrupt transition. I talk about it in the book, where it literally was a big fight that he and I had, where I said, you've got to stop pretending to be what you're not and stop applying for these high level jobs. Just go, we were in Hawaii, so just go get a job, and he was applying to be the hotel manager. We were in Hawaii. or to be the resort, executives. I said, we need you to make some money. We're starving to death. We have no money. We can't eat. We have literally $5 left. And he still wouldn't apply to be a doorman or a janitor or, a check-in clerk. He wouldn't do any of that. So I finally blew up at him, and I went out and got a job at 15. And we reversed roles for a little bit, where I took care of the family for a while until my mom could come and join us.
It's so interesting how necessity wouldn't allow you to internalize that sort of traditional, more submissive position as a woman. I mean, your life is a testament to the opposite of that, to seizing opportunities. When you got that 100 on your test, which was
I got the 98.
You got the 98, but it was great. He was wrong.
He was wrong. Yeah, but I needed the 100 in order to be. I talk about this. I needed to score 100% on certain tests in order to be selected to fly Blackhawks, and there were only 3 Blackhawk seats in the 40. For the 40 officers in my flight school class. So I had to be in the top 3 in order to get it. And I took this test, and I've always been an above average student, right? I've always been, most A's and B's, equal numbers, and maybe a C in there, always in band. I always played like 4th chair flute, because I have no rhythm. This is my problem. And if you get the audiobook, you'll hear me actually try to sing cadences. And I have no rhythm and no tone. I am tone deaf. And why I played a flute in band, because my dad told me to, because my dad said, that's a girl's instrument.
That's a girl's instrument, right?
Yeah. And so you can play the flute, and he had been in a marching band. So I wanted to be in a band, so it was all this sort of stuff. I tried to do the best that I could. And I think that at a certain point when we were in that situation, I took over the role of my mom, because my mom couldn't come with us to the States at first because she couldn't get a visa and we didn't have enough money. Because you got to pay to get a visa and you have to wait to get the visa. So we came first. So I had to be the mom. I think me taking on the role of mom overrode me being a subservient daughter.
Yeah.
Like, I knew I had to take care of my brother. I had to take care of my dad. And I did what my mom would have done, which is go out and get a job, whatever it is.
Well, it's a fascinating thing. I've followed you. I've supported you. I felt like I knew a lot about you, but all I knew was, I knew about your service. But it's very interesting reading the book, because I'm more grateful to have somebody who transcended real poverty. You guys were out of money several times, and that perspective in Senate in the Senate. You talk a lot about the way Republicans tend to negate the argument for a safety net is that it will make people lazy. And you make a very strong case that it gives them, it can give them the leg up that they desperately need. And I think as you know, statistically, people don't want to stay on any sort of public aid. People want to work, but it's and I'm sure it's an ongoing problem now. Like, how Republicans are making that same argument today, that telling their constituents they want to take money away from you and give it to lazy people, as if poverty is a character flaw. Are we getting any better at talking about those issues?
I think we have to be willing to talk about those issues. I did not talk about those issues and about being on food stamps when I ran for office in 2006, because I actually thought it would make me look weak.
Right.
And it's only been as I've represented the entire state of Illinois, as I've gone in and talked to people. And I remember I started talking about some of this, about my dad losing his job because I was in steel mill country in Southern Illinois. And I was in a room with these steel workers who'd been laid off. And one woman, and I said, I'm 52 years old and I've been laid off. I'm not going to get another job. No one's going to pay me to do that. And by the way, I've been laid off for 6 months now. I'm out of money. And I looked at her and I saw my family. And so I wanted her to know that I saw her. So I told my story, and my staff just went, "What? You never told us about that?"
Yeah.
And so and so I've been telling these stories, all the stories are in the book about the struggles and stuff, because I want people to see themselves in this book.
Yeah.
I hope that you see your parents, and I hope that you see the struggles your parents went through, and that you see maybe someone that you know and love, maybe it's yourself, who was on food stamps or who was hungry as a kid, or the struggles, and to know that, yeah, my life sounds very exotic when you sort of say, whoa, she was born in Thailand, lived in Cambodia, lived in Indonesia, lived in Hawaii. But if you look at it in parts, it's really the American story, right? And
It
the
is.
true promise. This book is really my love letter to my country, that the true promise of America is that if you're willing to work hard and you don't give up, even when you're on your knees, we won't give up on you either. That's the social contract of this country, that there will be free public schools that you can graduate from, that we're going to do what we can to keep kids in school by having them free, the school lunch and school breakfast program. If it wasn't for that program, I would have dropped out of high school. I would
Right.
have gone, I would have had, because we were hungry. That was the only time I ate for a good bit of my high school, of my
And it
senior year of
was
high school.
it was no, I thought about that a lot. It was actually that without that program, you would have not you would not have been in school. You would not have been able to survive. You guys were bringing home the dreaded apples to your father.
Yeah.
um, uh, and the fact that that has been vilified, it's one of the most frustrating things to me when I obviously am a partisan hack, but
It's okay. So am I. We're in good company.
we're in good company. But that troubled phrase, "Make America Great Again." If you try to think about what are they talking about, well, I think they're talking about the 50s. Now, if you were black, you probably couldn't vote. If you happen to be gay, you probably committed suicide in a closet. But the 50s is the fantasy, and the 50s was the result, and African Americans were excluded from this. People of color, all people of color were excluded from much of the New Deal, but the economic engine and the huge middle class was the result of this incredible investment that a country made. And I think it's something that Joe Biden is aware of and is understands, that that investment is what leads to our strength. But there's been this horribly undemocratic normalization of the idea that the government is the enemy, when
Right.
the good old days they're talking about was the result of investment. It again, that investment that excluded people of color, women, all sorts of Americans. How do we pass any of this stuff? I think it would be remiss of me when I'm talking to a senator not to ask you about the filibuster, what you think is going to happen in order to get the things we need to get done. What do you think is going to happen? Is I know people talk about getting rid of the filibuster. From my understanding, it seems like more likely there will be some adjustment of it. But I'm curious your view of all that.
So the filibuster is not in the Constitution, just so people know. It's not in the Constitution. It's a creation of the United States Senate to give voice to the minority party, so that the minority party could stop the ramrodding through of legislation just on a pure majority vote. And It was most heavily exercised during the Jim Crow era by Southern state senators who wanted to oppose the civil rights movement. It was in place before that, but it was really most exercised then.
Right.
So it really is not something that is this is American history, or it's not the founding fathers considered it and wrote it out as not being helpful to our democracy. But it was installed later. And so for me, the filibuster is about protecting the rights of 100 United States senators. And if you told me that my choice was keeping the filibuster to protect the rights of 100 senators versus getting rid of it in order to vote on a new civil rights bill, a voting rights act that would ensure people's rights to vote are protected, I'm going to choose the right to vote of Americans over the rights of 100 senators, to not have to get along with each other. So,
it's become a way. It's become a way for the minority party in the Senate to protect their rights, so that they can deny minority rights to the people that they represent. It feels insane to me.
All right. One of the things we could do is go to a talking filibuster, which is the way it used to be. When it was first put into place early, it's a Mr. Smith goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart image that people have when you say filibuster. They think of Jimmy Stewart standing there speaking until he collapses to defend his position. Maybe we go to that. You'd have more people actually being willing to negotiate with one another, and it wouldn't be a complete stoppage. Right now, a senator could mount a filibuster and get on a plane and go to Cancun, and and it doesn't cost him anything. So we need to reform the filibuster at the very least. But if it requires getting rid of it, a lot of this is in the Republicans' hands. If they're willing to work together and come to a compromise, then maybe we don't have to reform it. But if they're going to continue to do what Mitch McConnell has done during the entire 4 years of the Obama administration, and then on the reverse of it, during the Trump administration, he got rid of the filibuster on everything that had to do with judicial nominations and other nominations. So the only one that is left is legislative.
Yeah, I think people don't understand that Harry Reid initially, because McConnell was blocking all of the lower judicial, the non-Supreme Court judicial nominees of Barack Obama, for some reason, no appointees were going through, and Harry Reid said, well, then we're going to remove the filibuster just for non-Supreme Court judicial nominees. And then McConnell stole two seats when he extended it to the Supreme Court. I think people don't understand how malleable it is. It's a creation. I think some sort of federal baseline for voter protection. It is just extraordinary to me that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in 2013 gutted the Civil Rights Act, and his rationale was, "Hey, racism's over." I just want to grab him. I want to grab him by the lapels. I want him to answer that in some way, because obviously it's absurd, and I am gratified because I feel like my Democratic representatives and I feel like the president understands that every issue we care about. It's so frustrating because I think we call ourselves partisans, but most of the issues, most of the country agrees with us on access to health care. Most of the country agrees with us on dealing with the climate emergency.
Well, I'll give you
these
one.
Issues are popular.
I'll give you. The filibuster has been used to deny a vote even on issues that 95% of Americans approve of, like universal background checks, like for gun purchases, to close that gun show loophole. 95% of Americans support it.
Right.
dreamers. 95% of Americans support passing legislation for pathways to citizenship for dreamers, because it's not any fault of their own that they were brought here before they were 16. And yet we've not been able to even have a vote on it because the filibuster has been abused to prevent that from happening.
You know, yeah, it's an extraordinary. I'm sure you go crazy too when I think AP had a headline. Democrats to ram through background checks as how the discussion in DC gets framed as partisanship when it's not. I'm sure this will sound partisan, but one of these parties went crazy. In a way, I always say, forming a cult around the worst guy in show business was a move.
You know show business, I don't.
Oh my! Listen, that's a tough category. And that's I always say these Republicans always elect. I mean, it's funny because they hate show business, they say, but they seem to elect people from show business. They elect stars as president. We don't need actors or reality stars as presidents. We need like a production coordinator. To be president because they don't need attention and they get things done. It's always amazing to me if I have to do an interview, like a showbiz interview, later in the week. If I said to the reporter, "Okay, are you recording?" This is what your readers need to understand about me. I'm extraordinarily rich, and the reason I'm so rich is I am the greatest actor who ever lived. I don't know if you saw my work in Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise, but I'm a genius. If I said that, my idiotic little career would understandably instantly be over. How did it happen that a trust fund guy who said he was smarter than everybody became the hero of the working man? It's very bizarre. Very bizarre.
It is.
I think it was just kind of desperation because of the sort of demographics as destiny, and it's was sort of a way to hold on. Tell me what you're working on in the Senate. Tell me what we need to be doing to support what you want to get done here. What can the citizens do?
Well, the infrastructure package.
Yeah.
Reach out and make it clear to your legislators that they need to support the infrastructure package. So I am now chairwoman of the water subcommittee. So I'm super excited about it because I had to work hard to get it, but I get to work on inland waterways like the Mississippi River, but also fun things like sewers and water reclamation and lead pipeline to get the lead out of our drinking water supply. And so I actually just passed out of committee unanimously, all the Republicans even voted for it, a piece of legislation on water infrastructure that will create grant programs to help fix our nation's water infrastructure. And it is critical. There is a water main leak in this country every single minute. And for most people, if you look at your water bill, what you're paying for that water to be clean and brought up to standard that it can be piped into your house, you are paying for a small percentage of what you get. In parts of this country, the leakage in the water pipelines is 75%. So you're only getting 25% of the water that you're actually paying to be processed. And it is costing taxpayers significant amounts of money. So the $500 billion in the infrastructure package that we want to put in for water infrastructure will save taxpayers trillions of dollars in lost water. And so that is part of it. So reach out to, even if your congressman or congresswoman is a Democrat, reach out to your mayors. The mayors are the ones that are really pushing this, and they're the ones who are going to get Republicans on board. As
polarized as the discussion can be nationally. A way to transcend that polarization is to get involved in local politics. I mean, you know, a lot of Republican governors on the last package that was passed, the governor of West Virginia was really advocating for the, for passage. And I think people who get upset about the polarization, I always encourage them to get involved locally, where it's more about solving problems than photo ops by the Rio Grande, pretending you're something like a soldier.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I'll give you that. Right now, we estimate 20 million children don't have access to broadband, so they can't do their homework.
Yeah, incredible.
So we need to do broadband. We need to do, you know, broadband infrastructure, as well as the roads and rails and bridges. I don't know what it's like in California, but in Illinois, we have 2,000 plus bridges that are deemed structurally deficient, but we're still using them. So,
yeah, we just got. Didn't we get a D in the infrastructure grade, which is absurd, because there is so much work that could be done if we invest in our infrastructure that will give people jobs, meaningful jobs, middle class jobs. And
that money goes into the local economy. So when you talk about this $2 trillion price tag for this infrastructure package, that money doesn't actually go into somebody's bank account. That money goes into the local economy, because when that road crew takes a lunch break working on Main Street, they're going to go to the diner on Main Street, which is a small business, to buy their lunch.
Yeah.
You know, this is money that will get into every corner of this country and will actually generate revenue growth and pay back for itself in many cases the cost of the infrastructure package, just as the water portion of it will save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars.
I think that's such a good point, and something that in messaging we always have to do better. This is not we're not taking $2 trillion out of the economy. We're pouring it in, which tends to exponentially grow the economy, and is certainly a much better way of growing the economy than cutting taxes for people who are rich. Because that if you cut Bezos's taxes, it's not going to change his spending. If you cut a teacher's taxes, that money is going to go right back into the economy. And I think Republicans sort of weaponize the idea of democratic spending in a disingenuous way. Anyway, I could talk to you for hours. I strongly suggest, I'm telling you, I really inhaled it. In 2 sittings, 1 day.
Wow. I hope it made you cry a little bit, but also laugh out loud too.
I laughed a lot. I want you to do the dirty chants at some point. And
my husband is really good at those. He can sing. I have no rhythm.
Next time I see you, I'm going to tell you some filthy jokes,
Okay.
but I will not do it now. I think we have some questions. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, we do. Thank you, Bradley, and
Sure.
Listen to your conversation. Here's a few questions. The lady emails. I read the review of your book in the New York Times. It says Duckworth's first engagement with the military was, as is for many of us, a financial calculation. She enrolled in ROTC while already a graduate student at George Washington on the theory that she'd save money. Instead, she found her calling. The question is, what happened 3 weeks in that gave you that calling?
Well, I talk about this at length in the book, where I went because I'd been laid off and I didn't have anything to do that summer. And some of my classmates who were veterans said, well, just go to basic training. You'll make a little bit of money. And by the way, the drill sergeants will be yelling at you the whole time. They won't let you spend it. So as long as you don't spend your first paycheck on, booze and a tattoo, you're going to come out of it with some money, right? And so I went, and it was miserable, but it was a pure meritocracy. That's what I fell in love with, was the fact that I showed up and it didn't matter that I was this little Asian girl, this little half Asian girl. It only mattered if all they cared about was I willing to learn to shoot straight. And when we were on a road march, if my buddy dropped his rucksack because it was too heavy, was I willing to step up and help carry it? It was pure merit based. That's what I fell in love with.
Next question. Yeah. Would you comment on living as a biracial woman in Asia versus in the United States?
I've never fit in anywhere totally. It's been my experience. When I grew up in Asia in the 70s and early 80s, as a biracial child, I mean, the Thai term for me back then was quite derogatory. It's half child. It's now embraced in Thailand as a status symbol, but back then it was a term of contempt, that I was only half a person, a half child, that I was half white. And so all of my cousins would make fun of me because I had freckles and my skin wasn't smooth like theirs. And they have beautiful, long, black, shiny hair. And my hair tends to frizz because it's a little bit curly like my dad's. And, humidity is not good for my hair. And there's nothing but humidity in Thailand. So I never fit in when I was in Asia because I was bigger and clumsier and all of that. But then when I come to the States, I don't fit in here because I'm half Asian. And I've had people come up to me while I've been in uniform with the American flag on my shoulder, asking me, so where are you from, really? I mean, like, I'm from here. It's like, well, Duckworth is your dad's name, but where are you from? I'm like, if it's my dad's name, it's my name. I've been here since before the revolution. Where are you from, buddy? So there's this otherness with Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders on the mainland United States. That this position that people are always, we're just never quite Asian and never quite American enough. And my opponents actually attacked me, used to attack me in every campaign I've ever run. In my first campaign in 2006, my opponent actually photoshopped my face to make it extra big and round as if it's not already. And then photoshopped my eyes into slits and darkened my skin. In the last campaign that I ran, they questioned my Americanness and, well, yeah, sure, your parents left Thailand to come fight for George Washington, as if I wasn't a true patriot. And so it continues, where this otherness continues. And I hope that we get to a place where, we're all just a bag of Skittles, different, we're all Skittles, we're just different flavors of Skittles, but we should all, be able to keep our identity, but also be part of the greater identity of America.
There have been efforts to raise awareness about the rising violence against Asian Americans. What are the next steps to make sure we progress to a solution-oriented stage at this point?
So there are a couple things. I've already asked Christopher Wray, the FBI director, and Merrick Garland, our Attorney General, to do a review of all of the violence, all of the crimes against Asian Americans, and review them to see if they are hate crimes. Because we know that hate crimes against Asian Americans are underreported. They get classified as a mugging or vandalism or something like that, when it's really a hate crime. And so we need to actually get a real idea of what level of hate crime there is against Asian Americans. Even in this past year during coronavirus, with the crimes that are reported, we've seen 150% spike in hate crimes, specifically against Asian Americans, about 3,800 cases. 2/3 of those were against Asian women in particular, because there is this myth that Asian women are compliant and passive. I should talk to my husband because that's not true. there is that myth. And especially elderly Asian women. So the video you saw of the famous videos we've been seeing recently, the recent cases have all been elderly Asian women that have been attacked. And so that's one of the things that we can do. And then we need to learn to step up. And those folks in New York, watch that woman get beaten up and nobody came to help her. We should all be each other's keepers. We should all be stepping forward and confronting it. And in a lot of cases, just confronting it or calling the police will stop the crime.
In the By the Book piece in the New York Times, in response to what books capture your political principles, you highlighted Doris Kearns Goodwin's Team of Rivals. And you say the idea of bringing people together from different perspectives to serve the same cause is what you feel we need more of. The questioner says, I feel we desperately need that right now. And the question is, what are you personally doing towards that? What are others doing towards that? And how could we inspire each other, both sides of the aisle, to strive for more of that?
Up until Donald Trump, my answer would be, I assume that the other person loves this country as much as I do. And if they do, we can work together. Like, I just assume that their perspective on what this country that we both love equally, what they think this country needs and what I think it needs might be slightly different. But at least if we both love the country, we can find a way to common ground. I lost that with Donald Trump. I just don't think Donald Trump loves this country as much as I do. And I'm struggling to regain that with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are doubling down on Trump and what he's saying. That said, I try to find common ground as much as possible. I work a lot with my colleagues who are veterans. And then I try to explain my progressive ideas in terms that I think they might accept. So, for example, the fact is that a lot of the recruits for the military don't make it because they can't pass the basic math and English test that's written at the 8th grade level to enlist. So I say to my colleagues, it's worth it to invest in public education. Even if you don't care about, poor kids around the country, at least you care about the Army, right? Why? And the Air Force, why buy F-35 fighter jets for hundreds of millions of dollars if there's no one who can fix them or fly them because they can't pass the basic math and English test? Let's make these investments in education, for the defense of the nation, if that's what you care about. But at least let's make the investment. So I try to find common ground where I can. It was really hard during the 4 years of the Trump administration. I will tell you, this first vote that we had on the American Rescue Plan, where not a single Republican senator voted for it, was really demoralizing. The fact that not a single one of them would vote to send help to people who are struggling, who can't put food on the table, who have not been able to pay their mortgage, or who they wouldn't vote to send more money for vaccines. They wouldn't send more money to public schools that needed the money to get to a point where kids can come back to in-person learning. That was pretty demoralizing. But I keep trying. I keep showing up. We passed the water bill out of committee unanimously. So, there's a little hope there.
Next question is, we all make mistakes or change our position on something. Not that changing a position is a mistake. And so do politicians. We are all human. Question is, the media and the general public seem very unforgiving of changing a position on something or somebody having made a mistake. And it's treated like a weakness when it actually should be a strength. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think the willingness to address why you change your position is very important, and you have to allow people to grow. We all grow and learn as we get older and as we get better at our jobs. And I think that we can get to a place where we can change our positions. And I think if we were able to do that, I think that we could actually get more consensus so that people don't have to keep a hard line, position. I think that we could probably get more Republicans who would vote for universal background checks after having seen so many massacres, mass shootings where people were able to get a gun the same day or they bought it from a gun show, that sort of thing. But if we're unforgiving of their, changing positions, then there's no incentive for them to change their position, right? And they're just going to stay where they are. So we don't want people to become entrenched. We want people to grow and be able to work together. And we should be more forgiving of the ability, and give people the ability to change their minds.
Here's a fun one. Your children are the first kids born to a sitting senator. Do they know what mom does?
Okay, so they're not the first born to a sitting senator because the men have been having babies for years. Some of them even claim the babies as their own. I'm the first senator to actually give birth to one, to actually push one out, as it were. They do know. So Abigail, I write this in the book. Abigail is really hilarious. Miley doesn't get it yet, but Abigail gets really annoyed when we get recognized in public, when we're doing something for her, like when I'm going to Target and I'm in the toy aisle. And Abigail, when she was very young, we started teaching her mommy's name and daddy's name in case she get lost so she could tell people who she was and all of that. And we said, what's daddy's name? You say, Brian. So, well, what's mommy's name? And she'd go, Tammy Duckworth. I was like, what? And then it occurred to me that you're watching all of these campaign commercials on TV where we say, I'm Tammy Duckworth and I approve these messages. And that's all it's been hearing. So that's how she thought mommy's name would be said. And then when we would be at Target at the aisle, in the toy aisle, and I'm supposed to be giving her all my attention, somebody comes up and goes, oh my God, Senator Duckworth, I love you. Can I have a picture with you? And I'll pay attention to the constituent. Abigail will come back, stop in front of me, look at me and go, Tammy Duckworth, and then stomp off, like, stop being the senator. I want my mommy back. But that's how she signals me that she's done. She's done with the senator. She wants mommy and her Barbie doll.
Next question simply is, how do you find balance in your life?
Yeah, and there's no balance. I covered this in the book too.
Yeah.
I actually talk about, in the book, I go into detail about a meltdown episode. I go for the 80% solution. This is what the Army taught me. If you try to be the perfect mom and the perfect senator and do everything perfectly, you are going to go crazy. There's no such thing as work-life balance, especially for women who work outside the home, moms who work outside the home. So let's just be clear about that is a lie. You do the best that you can. And that means that sometimes as I'm running to get on the plane to go back to Illinois with my kids, and they're being a pain in the butt, you're going to see one with a ring pop in her mouth, despite me not wanting them having sugar, and they're both going to be in the pajamas because I couldn't get them to change their clothes. But hey, we got on the damn airplane on time. Okay, so it's there's no real balance. I do try to set boundaries. This was something that Senator Gillibrand taught me, where I always tell all of my colleagues and anybody who's with me that I don't do in-person meetings before 9 a.m. because my daughter gets on the school bus at 8:30. Sorry, you want to talk to me? That's not going to happen when school's in session. That is my daughter's time, and I get her ready, and that is my time with her, and that is sacred. So I am very clear about my boundaries. Now I get to do that because I run my own office. I'm a U.S. Senator. It's very different for other folks, but I think boundaries are very important, and boundaries that you yourself don't cross as well. So I oftentimes will, be tempted to take an 8 a.m. meeting with somebody who's really important, like Bradley Whitford. But I have to tell myself, no, he can wait until Abigail gets on the school bus.
An email question says, I saw another Duckworth speak at Live Talks Los Angeles, Angela Duckworth, on her book, Grit. And you seem to be the poster person for that book. Where do you get your grit from?
Probably my mom, but I will tell you, the book is called Every Day is a Gift because every day since my shoot down, when I should have died, is a gift that has been given to me by my buddies who saved me. And that for me is my North Star. So no matter what happens in the day, I know that I have a day that I would normally not have had they not sacrificed so much to save my life. And I live every day. I say a prayer of thanks every morning and thanking my crew for saving my life. And then I try to live a day as well as I could and as I can in honor of that. So I have that to fall on. And I think everyone needs to figure out what their North Star is and just be easy on yourself. Sometimes, there's a chapter in the book called Own the Suck. You gotta recognize sometimes the situation you're in just sucks, but recognize that it's your suck, own it. And sometimes owning it means, staying in a fetal position, but at least calling into a Zoom, or, maybe that's all you can do for that day. Maybe you're absolutely exhausted. You get home and you can't make a homemade dinner from scratch for your kids, but you can make them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and hey, there's protein, there's carbs, you're done. Okay, give yourself some slack.
2 quick questions. What did it feel like to be on the short list for vice president?
Yeah, surreal. It was a lot of vetting. Let me tell you. Somebody had actually said that it's going to feel, going through that process of being vetted, is going to feel like I'm getting a colonoscopy. And then towards the end of the process, they actually asked for pictures from my colonoscopy. And I went, okay, well, there you go. They wanted my health records. They're like, wait, your colonoscopy results are missing. You say it's normal, but is it really? It was a great honor. I got to talk to amazing folks. I got to really talk with then Vice President Biden and have really long conversations with him. Got to know him much better. But it was an ordeal, and I'm glad it's done, and I'm back to being a U.S. Senator.
Final question comes from somebody in Illinois. You are my senator.
Yay.
When are you going to run for president of the United States?
Yeah, never. Listen, I never say never, but I will tell you, I've never said no when my country has called, but I have no ambition whatsoever to run for president. And I've told my buddies, my closest friends, especially the guys on my crew, I've told them, you saved me once. If I ever utter those words, get a broomstick and stick them through the spokes of my wheelchair so I can't move and stop me from myself. Because every senator gets up, the saying is every senator gets up and looks in the mirror in the morning and thinks, I'm smarter than that guy in the White House. How come I'm not president yet? I don't have that fire in my belly. I love representing Illinois. There's so much more work that I want to do. We got to pass universal family leave. We got to pass pre-K. We've got to pass all sorts of legislation on green energy. There's a lot more to do yet. So not anytime soon will I ever run for president.
Well, thank you, Senator Duckworth. It was an honor to host you, and much thanks, Bradley, for returning to our series and talk with Senator. Again, Senator Duckworth's book is Every Day is a Gift. It is available wherever books are sold, and a limited number of signed copies are available on our website at livetalksla.org/store. Thank you, and go on gently.